Now on to our first speaker to kick off today's event, David Downs. David is the chairman of the Well Foundation and High Tech Trust, and he's had a successful career in both the private and public sector with senior roles at organisations such as Microsoft and New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. David is a published author on New Zealand innovation with 2 highly successful books, Number 8 Rewired and Number 8 Recharged. He's an ex-comedian, TV and radio actor, semi-finalist for New Zealander of the Year, and, in his words, a genetically modified cancer-killing machine who documented his battle with cancer in his book, A Mild Touch of the Cancer. David co-founded SOSbusiness.NZ, a not-for-profit initiative to help cafes and other small businesses during COVID-19. It quickly became a huge hit and to date has sold over $2 million in vouchers for over 2,500 small businesses. He also released a new book, Silver Linings, in March this year. So welcome, David. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to hearing your story. So on that note, I'll hand over to you.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui ki tēnei wānanga, ngā mihi nui ki kia koutou. Welcome everybody. It's nice to have you here. There's 139 of us on the school, but I can only see myself, so that's weird. But I have managed to get my teenage son to also log on, so at least I know there's one person actually watching, Toby. Anyway, wonderful to be here. I'm going to be very adventurous today, and I'm going to share my presentation in a way that I've never done it before. Because that's, I think, what you should always push the boat out a little bit, and bring up a new presentation that I just put together in the last couple of days about how to build a great team. But hang on, I'm going to move myself. Hang on a second. This is the new clever interface that I've just found that you can do via Zoom. How not to build a great team, because it's very easy to talk lots of leadership lessons about how to build teams. But when I was reflecting on this talk, I thought what I'd actually look at is the mistakes that I've made as a manager and a leader over the last many years of my career, and sort of talk about some of the lessons that come from that. Because I think it's much better sometimes to talk about things that you've done wrong rather than the things you've done always right. Because I believe that, you should never just make a mistake once. You should get really good at making mistakes and carry on, making 5 or 6 times. So today I'm going to share with you my 5 tips for how not to build a great team. But in order that I can do that well, let's build a bit of credibility for myself. Here's me. You heard a little bit about my my bio, but I started my life. Hang on, I've got to get my. If you're looking for someone with a very conventional career, very much in the career ladders and management techniques, then that's not me. You come to the wrong seminar. I had a very unconventional career. I left university after a year or two. Became a stand-up comedian. After years of working in acting and stand-up, I set up my own businesses, ran a few small businesses back in the days when we didn't have trendy phrases like startup. We just had small failing companies. But anyway, I ran some of them. Then I went to work for a big global multinational, Microsoft. Spent about 15 years there, where I really learned kind of the craft of management at a corporate level. And a lot of the lessons I'm going to talk about today come from that time. And then I spent the last 10 years working at New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and now I do some consulting work. I work at in different government agencies and help with government and other strategy. And I do a whole lot of board work. That's the stuff down the bottom there. A lot of, that way. I'm on the boards of multiple organizations and helping kind of guide those organizations. So I guess I've seen management from being a person being managed, from being a first line manager, from being a kind of a senior manager, from being a board director. And I guess these lessons today are an amalgam of all of those lessons. So we've got about 25 minutes together. Let's kick into it. My first lesson, my first mistake: waiting until it rains before you fix the roof. This is a classic one. In fact, in the book that was referred to earlier that we just put out recently, Silver Linings. Please hold while I get a copy. Hang on. Always be selling. Available now in all good bookshops, apart from you can't see it because of the very clever Zoom thing. Silver Linings is a book about New Zealand businesses who've been through COVID and done really well. And one of the key lessons that came out from all of them is they didn't wait until it rained before they fixed the roof. What do we mean by that? What we mean there is that organizational culture is the thing that you do when times are tough. It's the thing that'll get you through. Organizational culture is sort of the energy of the fuel of the organization in those times when you really need to dig deep. But you can't just build organizational culture in a minute. It takes a long time to build organizational culture. It takes you've got to be building this and when times are good. The best time to fix the roof is when it's not raining. So organizational culture, how does one go about building organizational culture? I guess, and I'm going to go through this really, really fast and very, very informally, but my best definition of culture is the things you walk past as a leader or a manager. If you have an organization or a place of work where you put up with things, or you ignore difficult things, or you allow the metaphorical and physical trash to pile up, you get that as part of your culture. That's basically what you deserve. And so leadership for me, one of the best things to do is understanding how you as a leader can build the organizational culture by focusing on the things that really matter for the organization, and then not allowing things that are outside that culture that you want to persist. So making sure that you've really got a set of guidelines, boundaries, expected ways of being that you can adhere to. It's very easy to say, it's much more difficult to do, I get that, but all other things we're talking about later on this talk will build on this particular point, because we're going to go through these 5 really fast. This is the best sort of, I think, mission statement that I've ever seen. This is a pretty good organizational culture. It doesn't have to be a set of 15 different attributes and values and purpose statements and mission statements that are on posters all over the wall. It can be a very simple thing, the way things are done around here. This is a really good statement of their organizational culture. Lots of organizations aspire to this. I know one really amazing New Zealand company whose organizational culture and value is described in one word, which is kindness. And they're a very commercially oriented organization, but they've decided that the best word to sum up their organizational culture is kindness to themselves, to their suppliers, to their customers, to their staff. And basically, a simple depiction of what your organizational culture wants to be, and then making sure you never stray from it. You never allow the dickheads to creep in. Another top tip for you. A wise manager once told me this. Sometimes, when you're designing your organization, you think about how, you're going to hire this many FTEs, this many staff, you're going to get these people doing these things, and then damn it, human beings turn up. And they turn up with their frailties and their self-doubt and their challenges, and their mothers who are sick, and their children who are having troubles at school, and their issues with their divorce going on. And so really deeply understanding that we're not talking about work units, we're talking about humans. And humans have some really interesting attributes. We are not machines. We're not robots that you just point at a task and then they execute a task. Humans have all these different intelligences. And now you would have heard of IQ, of course, that's kind of the key thing. You might have even heard of EQ. But I also think there's these other intelligences too that we have, and that we have to really think about when we're managing and leading teams. PQ, physical intelligence. SQ, spiritual intelligence. A bit woo-woo, I'm getting a bit woo-woo. Years ago, I went on a training course at Microsoft. I remember, big American corporate, and they flew us up to Seattle, and we went to this incredible, training facility out in the hills near the campus. And I thought, wow, we're going to get this organizational strategy and discussion and talk, and we're going to get all this amazing download. And no, in fact, what we did is spent 3 or 4 days learning about how to breathe better, learning about how to eat well at work, learning about how to sleep. And it made me really understand that we have these multiple parts, multiple aspects of humanity that we have to always think about. And as a leader of people, it's your job not just to think about the IQ, or is it the brain that they bring to work, but actually you've got to think about how do you activate all the intelligences that people bring to work. And when you do that sincerely and well, you get a lot more out of it. So here's a little exercise you can do. Let me just kind of run through these 4 things. So IQ, obviously how you think, what's your mental capacity? What is your capacity for creating intellectually stimulating work? PQ, how's your physical capacity? That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an elite athlete all the time, But are you treating your body well? Are you sleeping well? Do you have an environment around you that's conducive to good intellectual work? EQ, are you connecting well with the people around you? Do you understand what motivates them? SQ, spiritual connection. I think this is actually probably the most important one, and the one that hardly ever gets spoken about. This is your value, your core value system. It underpins almost everything else. You can be a highly intelligent, buff, well-connected person, but if you're standing on a foundations of sand, you don't have a strong belief and value system, then you're not going to be successful. So here's a little exercise you can do for yourself while you're listening to me. I'll move myself again. I'll move myself over here. Think about these 4 quotients and take time every day just to sort of step back and think about these 4 intelligences and how you are performing against the 4 of them. Am I right now, where I am today in this moment, do I feel stimulated? Maybe in the EQ front, do I understand what's important to the people around me? Am I nurturing good relationships with people? Do I eat well? Am I feeling like I've moved enough lately? And then even more deeply, do I really understand what inspires me? What's making me want to be here versus somewhere else? What do I believe in? What do I stand for? So if you do that little sort of self-diagnosis, this warrant of fitness on yourself every day, you'll start to really understand how these 4 intelligences can come to bear and be important for you in your day job, let alone the people that work for you. Now, a lot of people think that, we are very rational and straight up and down, and, Homo sapiens is the thinking person, the thinking man. The reality is we are emotional creatures. We create emotional decisions, and then we validate and justify and intellectualize them later. And we make very poor decisions, and we need to just acknowledge that. Take a look at this picture here. These 2 tables, I would ask you to put up your hands, but it's not possible. Think about which of these tables is longer. And of course, those of you who have already kind of jumped ahead and realized the answer is neither of them. They're exactly the same length. We can't trust our senses. The length of the table on the vertical looking table and the length of the horizontal looking table are exactly the same. Human beings are emotional creatures, and then we justify intellectually our response to things. We can't be trusted. You can't be trusted. Here's a good example, quite well-known study that was done a few years ago using judges in Israel, parole judges. So these are the judges whose job it is to decide whether prisoners should be released from prison. By definition, judges are the most logical, the most intellectual people, in our workforces. And yet here is a graph of their decision-making outputs versus time, where you can see there's 3 big jumps. And those 3 big jumps relate to the fact of whether they'd had lunch or afternoon tea. So the terrible thing, if you're an Israeli prisoner going up for parole, is the best time for you to go in front of the parole judge is straight after they've had a break and eaten. And then their intellectual capacity comes to the fore. As they get more and more tired, their decision-making goes down and down and down, and you are much less likely to be released from prison. Human beings are emotional creatures, and we make emotional decisions. And when you really truly understand what that means in the work environment, you don't expect people to be perfect all the time. You don't expect people to be like these machines that are kind of giving you these amazing outputs. You allow for emotion. You allow for personal and individual values and spirituality. Oh, I'm going deep. Right, tip number 3, mistakes that you can make. Hiring any old Tom, Dick and Harry. And what I mean by that is not necessarily your hiring practices means you let just anybody in. I mean your hiring practices mean you let everybody that looks the same in. This is really the story of diversity. And in a very ambitious next slide, I'm using a metaphor. I'm decided I'm going to be a business school professor someday. So this is my new metaphor, my new business school theory about diversity in the workplace. I think a workplace is like an orchestra. If you had an orchestra that was only made up of one section, just the string section or the horn section, it wouldn't sound very good. It would sound pretty tedious and monotonous. So you've really got to think about how you layer the orchestra together. And I think there are multiple different ways that people think about diversity in the workplace. Some people think diversity is an obligation. So we should have a diverse workforce. We need more Maoris. Excuse me if I'm offending anyone, but that's a phrase I've heard before. We need more women. No reason why, we just need them. We're obliged to, we have to, we should get to 50%, whatever. That's an obligation. The next sort of more, I suppose, sophisticated way of thinking about it is this diversity as a side effect. It's better, but it's not much better, frankly. This is the whole myth, I think, of let's hire the right person for the job. And I think that is the right person. You know, that is a myth, because that means diversity will come as a side effect. And that would be good if it happened, but it's unlikely to, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. The third, much more intelligent one is diversity as a choice. Diversity in the workplace as a choice. Your staff, your employees, your humans that work with you should represent your customers, should represent society as a whole, should represent different perspectives and viewpoints and challenges and different ways of thinking. And if we truly have diversity as a choice, we need one more element for it to all come together, and that is inclusivity. It's great to have all the right people on the bus, but if the people on the bus aren't allowed to say anything, then you're not getting the best out of them. We need those people to be genuinely creating value, to be their voices to be heard, their opinions to be brought to the fore. So inclusivity is a strategy built on diversity, which is a strategic choice that you also make. I'll also point out here, just because I want to be a business school professor, so that I'm sort of trialing one new theory. This is what I call the French horn theory of diversity in the workplace. Hope you like it. Now, I talked about this idea that diversity is a side effect. When you go for the best person for the job, it's actually not always the best outcome that you can expect. And here's partly why. This is a diagram that my wife keeps on the fridge to remind me about her challenges and her daily struggles. Choosing the best person for the job assumes that every person that came in the door had an equal opportunity to walk in the door with their best self. And the reality is they don't. We all start from a different starting position. Some of us have a lot more challenges in front of us. And therefore, you're much more likely to be fishing from a much smaller pool than if you allow for a much wider, more consciously chosen, diverse workforce. One of the organizations I'm involved with is called the High Tech Foundation, and we are we look at the technology sector in New Zealand, and we help the tech sector to celebrate the success that we've had over the last 25 years. It's been an amazing success, but we also know the technology sector has some serious challenges with diversity. Should move myself out of the way. Where most of the people look like me, frankly. Most of the people who are successful in technology sector look like me, and that's wrong, because talent is everywhere. Like, the entire population is equally talented. The bell curve goes everywhere, but opportunity is not. So what we've been doing in the High Tech Foundation is creating strategically chosen, absolutely consciously put out there programs to help more diverse people into the technology sector. This is not a handout. This is a hand up, to use the cliche, because we need people that represent all of society, all the different walks of life. There in this group, there are single mothers, there are people who've come from a group of 12 12 siblings. There are people that are first people in their family to get a tertiary education. We're just creating opportunities for these people to flourish in their work and personal lives. So diversity is a choice. It shouldn't be a side effect. Right. Next tip, top tip number 4. I'm firing through because we've only got a short amount of time. Having a leadership stance. I remember going to a job interview once, and someone said, "What's your leadership stance?" And I thought about that a lot, because I thought, what a ridiculous concept that you would have a single stance, that you would have one way of being that's the same for any situation, any person, any problem, any company. The reality is that leadership is very, very situationally dependent and very nuanced. And there's a great, the whole idea that you're going to have this Goldilocks leadership management, that you've got leadership that's not to this and not to that. I know I have a tendency sometimes to be too vague with some people and too directive with others, and therefore I'm going to find a leadership style that's exactly right. The reality is that's never going to be true, because of this idea that leadership styles are situational. And if you've never seen this framework before, it's a fantastic framework. I'd recommend it, the situational leadership model, Hershey and Blanchard's model, which really helps you as a leader understand how you relate to people depending on your both of your situations, particularly the situation of the person you're coaching or mentoring or directing. And what it says is, as people are going through this curve, you start on the right, if you like, at the bottom right. People are immature, they're developing their skills. As they get better up, you're moving from being quite directive, quite distinct, quite, I suppose, specific about what you want, much more to a coaching mode, then eventually to a supporting mode, and then you're delegating and allowing people to make their own choices. So what again is another little framework that you can use to sort of step back and say, where am I now with this person in this context? This person has just come to ask me their opinion. Where are they in their development cycle? Where am I, and what mode should I be in? And so getting rid of the idea of having a single leadership stance and realizing that leadership is situational is a big breakthrough. Top tip number 5. I think I've only got time for 5, so this will be the 5th. Thinking that they only came for the pay. This is a mistake a lot of employers make, was that, oh, we pay them pretty well, we pay them close to market, or we're, the 65th percentile, whatever it might be. The challenge there is that people don't come to work for the pay. Well, they do, but they don't. And all of you will I'm sure, know the nuance there. You'll all have seen this, hopefully. We've all kind of had this thrust down our throat before, but this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We start with the basic physiological needs, we go up to safety, security, love, belonging, self-esteem, and then finally this nirvana state of self-actualization. Most people are on a journey somewhere in here. Most people in their work life would aspire to be further up the curve. So as we go through, and again, this is kind of an exercise to think about afterwards with you and your teams, think about where they might be on this journey. And I tried to put this into the sort of the workplace version of this, of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but you might want to do one of these for your own staff and say, thinking about, okay, in that first hierarchy, do I know where to sit? Is the air conditioning too cold? Is like, can I actually do my job? Am I physically able to and psychologically able to be here? Are the bathrooms a bit weird? I always find it funny when you turn up to a workplace and they don't really welcome you, or they don't really show you where things are. And you never really then got that physiological safety element. The second step, safety and security. This is where the pay thing comes in, I reckon. I think it's only way down here. Like, am I being paid enough is important, but there are other things later that are more important. What's the norms in this place? Is everyone working late? Do I have to work late? Do people talk to me? Are people nice? As we further go up, am I being appreciated with my work? Do people sort of know when, what's important to me? When's my birthday? Does my boss seem to know what I do? When I further up self-esteem, when I do a good job, do people notice? Do I get recognized? Do I feel like I've done a good thing? And then finally in this hierarchy, and this is where we're all trying to reach personally, but also for our employees, the most critical thing that employees want is the sense of purpose and meaning for their work, that what they're doing actually makes a difference for something bigger than themselves, that they have agency, they have their own control over what they do, their own personal control. They're appreciated for their work and they have a future in their work. Those are the sorts of things that actually people are seeking. Pay is just one element really low down on the hierarchy. So I'd again encourage you to think about this hierarchy of needs, do a little exercise, maybe get your team together, show them the Maslow's hierarchy, and then actually start to plot things in and then ask people where they think they are on this hierarchy and what do we think as a workplace we need to do to help us all get further up in the hierarchy. Very powerful to do this, co-create this with your team. So there we go. I'm going to finish up now. Those are my 5 rocket fast tips on how to build a great team. Actually, I'll put myself over here because I'm more authentic. Hang on, I'll put myself there. There we go. Waiting until it rains before you fix the roof, hiring staff, not humans, hiring any old Tom, Dick or Harry, having a leadership stance, and thinking they're only here for the pay. Kia kaha. Hope we got some questions.
Yes, fantastic, David. Thank you for that. I love personally the bit about don't make one mistake, but go for 4, 5, 6, yeah, maybe. Why not? We definitely have questions coming in, and not from your son either. But not yet. We've got one here from Tegan. She's saying she loves your comment about the standard you walk past is the standard you'll get in your company culture. So she's saying, do you have any advice for leaders on small changes they could make to help clean up the trash and change that?
I do. Look, one of the best examples is if you have a company culture that allows people to be, and this is going to sound very trivial, but it's there's a thing that the New York police used years ago called broken windows, which was the idea that to fix murders, to solve murders in a city, you actually go around fixing the broken windows. Similarly in a workplace, if you have a culture that allows people to be 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes late for a meeting, to kind of wander off near the end without really closing the meeting properly, and if you as a leader do that or allow others to that to happen, those little things, I know that sounds like a trivial one, but that's an example. Similarly, I remember going to a workplace once where they had one of those water filters and it wasn't working. And I said to them, oh, did it just break this morning? They said, oh, no, it's been broken for ages. And I went, well, how come no one's fixed it? Like, you get what you walk past. As a leader, the fact that no one had fixed that sent a signal to the entire organization that we didn't really care about you. We didn't care enough to fix the water filter. So it's those sorts of tiny things that accrue, do many, many things, discipline, and then accrue to a much bigger culture.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got another question anonymously. As a leader within a business, what advice would you give a leader looking to improve organizational culture, especially when you need to challenge upwards in a senior leadership position? That's as well as downwards. That's a good question. Yeah, it's a challenging thing. You mentioned that earlier.
You've got to give people permission to challenge, and you've got to create that, and very visibly give people permission. So being open, vulnerable, inviting questions, inviting criticism. And the way to do that, if you're not an organization that already does that, I'm very lucky. Most of the organizations I work with, challenge is one of their kind of almost core competencies. People are encouraged to challenge because challenge gives you a better idea. Challenge isn't negative, challenge is building. So that's one of the first things. One of the ways to do that is to potentially take something like the 6 hats, the 6 hats methodology of where you take a problem in a meeting, you'll look at it from the different perspectives, including what could go wrong. I saw a great thing yesterday that Walt Disney used to do that with all of his films. He would start with this massive dream. He called it the dream, and then he would go into the reality, and then he went into the what could go wrong bit. And the what could go wrong allowed everybody in the room to actually make the idea better. So those are the sorts of things you want to really encourage in your team, is say, let's take 5 minutes and say, what could go wrong? And then seek that, and then genuinely take that feedback on board.
Absolutely. Look, David, I think we could keep chatting all day. That is fantastic. But unfortunately, we've got our next speaker due to come. Yes, unfortunately, coming up soon. But look, if there's anyone who wants to ask some more questions of David or get in touch, you can click on the Now Attending button and get in touch with him there if he is happy to stick around in the environment for a little bit longer.
Great stuff. Nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, David.